Welcome to the Co-Creators Podcast. I'm Chloe Anderson.
And I'm Lakita Williams, and we help leaders and organizations build the future of work.
Hello, co-creators, and welcome back to the Co-Creators Podcast. We're so glad to have you here with us today. This is our final episode in our AI and Culture series, and today we have Nikki Silvestri with us. Nikki is the CEO and founder of Soil and Shadow. She's also an international keynote speaker, an environmental advocate, and someone who has spent her career asking really hard questions about who benefits and who bears the cost. Today, we're exploring AI through a systems lens and what does it actually mean to lead with equity and ethics when the technology is moving this fast. This is a conversation that challenged us, it expanded us, and it left us with a lot to sit with. So we hope that you enjoy. And with that, let's get into it.
Nikki, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. We are
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
we are so thrilled to be bringing this conversation to more people. I think we have been talking about artificial intelligence like in all of our conversations. I know when you and I talk, we're talking about AI, we're texting about AI. So just lots to discuss, but not a lot of public conversation, I think, within like our communities as we think about culture and all the things. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate being invited on. And thank you so much for having me. I'm excited about the conversation too.
Yes, and I think it'll flow in a lot of different ways. But I think my very first question for you is as you think about AI, we'll call it AI, artificial intelligence, throughout the interview, do you see it as the commons, kind of thinking about our shared resources and how we think about things like public parks, libraries? Or do you see it as the Wild West in terms of folks just moving at their own speed, not really a collaborative space, not how it should be, but what you're seeing right now?
Yeah, it's funny because it's actually feels like it's both happening simultaneously. And the education gap is really the biggest thing. So as I've been going on down real rabbit holes around Reddit threads that no one who is not a techie should be on, I'm learning how much language models have been around for such a long time. It's just
Yeah.
that very few people knew how to use them. And OpenAI and Anthropic and Grok, all these other companies that have built the ones that we use now, just figured out how to make the user interface a particular way so that people could understand them. But the commons for me at this point is that you can have locally hosted models on your own computer with your own external hard drives that are totally private to you, that don't use data center energy or water, that do for me feel like the commons, but they require a level of technical expertise that most people don't have, right? Especially the ones who feel like they're already racing against the clock to learn the easiest versions of AI, which is where the Wild West is coming in, is
Yes.
productivity and efficiency is changing so dramatically for most people that they do feel like they're in a bit of a hamster wheel to just
Hmm.
try to keep up with that.
Yeah, the rush is real, right? And everyone is really being pushed. I had a conversation last week, and someone was like, every conversation with the leader in our organization, they're like, how are we using AI? How many people are using AI? And I think that push is, moving along a sense of like false urgency, or would you call it false urgency, or is it real in terms of people getting left behind?
Nah, definitely doesn't feel false to me. Well, from the perspective, right, of every budgeter
Yeah.
is always looking for ways to save money.
Hmm.
And every new innovation that comes out that makes something half as difficult or 10 times as fast is going to be a task that's replaced. And those tasks do aggregate up to jobs being replaced. And that
Yeah.
is very immediate and it's very real for people and it's already happening. So, no, it doesn't feel false. And I think even the people where it's not happening to them immediately are noticing that there's an expectation around their productivity and efficiency Where if they're
Mm-hmm.
not using it, then they're not getting things done quickly enough. And then there's the issue of like work slop, which is a whole other conversation, and
Yeah.
not putting your best foot forward and not having time to check hallucinations and double check the work. It's a lot. But no,
It's
it's
a
not
lot.
false.
Yeah, it's a lot. So the urgency is there. How do we I love that you said, okay, there is a way for us to do this which is more thoughtful, right? And more supports the environment while elevating individual work. I think a lot of that is systems based, right? Like, so we need to rethink the system versus blaming how individuals are using it. And that's something I am seeing a lot, like a lot of individual accountability on don't you want clean water, right? Like I see that on threads all the time. But what comes up for me, and I know your work centers in systems as well, is like, but what's the system that we need to build in order to support the individuals, not putting that burden on individuals? And I'm curious what your thoughts are about how we use systems thinking. And is that true? Like, do you agree with that or disagree?
Oh, I agree with that so much. I actually just did a presentation for three different philanthropic organizations that
Mm-hmm.
got 150 or so of their grantees to sign up for a workshop on AI that my firm Soil and Shadow is doing in partnership with Software for Good. I was
Mm-hmm.
responsible for the environmental impact section and used a lot of my climate and food systems background to design a framework and way of thinking about this that really activated people's systems thinking prowess. So some of the questions I was asking in there were, we do know data centers use energy and water. How
Mm-hmm.
much energy and water compared to the other ways that energy and water are used globally? How much of a percentage is that? We also know that many of our internet activities use data center energy and water.
Yeah.
How does AI compare to those, right? Like we read these statistics about energy and water and AI, but most of us don't have context for the implications of that in
Wow.
relationship to our other activities.
Yeah.
So if we're looking at water, because that's a really big one, a 1 hour Zoom call uses a tremendous amount of data center water if the video is on. Streaming, 4K video for 10 minutes uses a tremendous amount of data center water.
Mm.
Streaming Spotify, uploading documents to Dropbox. There are these really just snatch your edges away
Mhm.
graphs that show you normal data center activities compared to one query, even a very large query. And now we're talking about AI queries that are text based, right? Video
Okay.
generation and audio generation is a whole other ball of wax. But big picture from a systems perspective, we should look at all of our data center activity and
Okay.
make educated choices about what is an essential data center activity and what is not. And then when it comes to the environmental impact of data centers, if you're looking at all of the energy and water globally, data centers are a fraction of that. So you do still want to be looking at things like agriculture, which is
Yeah.
70% of the world's water usage, right? So you do still want to be looking at other systems like that, or transportation and industry when it comes to energy. However, part of the environmental justice implications of data centers is where they're placed, and
Okay.
that the local pull on
Yeah.
local and regional infrastructure is insane sometimes when it
Yeah.
comes to data centers for a lot of reasons that I won't get into right now. So, knowing regional advocacy is vital, and not demonizing AI in a way that is hypocritical also feels vital.
Mm, mm. Okay. I That was a lot of brilliant information. What I'm hearing coming out of that is that there is a huge gap in like public knowledge,
Correct.
understanding around data centers, usage. Like we are all kind of don't have a lot of, I would say, clarity around environmental usage. And do you think that's something that like we need to be more responsible for? Should AI organizations be leading that conversation? What's the responsibility there?
Oh, that's such a good question. That's such a good question. I feel slightly controversial saying this, so I'm going to
Okay.
say
Do
it's a
it.
both and,
Okay.
right? Because this is my background as an advocate,
Mm,
right? So a part of my personal philosophy, no one else listening has to take this on, but a part of my personal philosophy is to understand my footprint because I
mhm.
have been a climate activist from day one,
Yeah.
right? So I want to know all of my activities in relationship to each other and the big picture of where resources go, energy, water, whatever you're using. How does it all relate to each other? What does the whole picture look like? And I do think that is each of our responsibilities so that we're not overly demonizing one thing because it's a good soundbite right now, but then advocating for it isn't actually going to impact the bigger picture of what it is we're trying to impact. Now, that's not to say that data center advocacy when it comes to AI is not
Mhm.
worthwhile. It
Mhm.
absolutely is
Mhm.
because of the local and regional pull and
Okay.
the fact that there is no regulation right now and no governance around how decisions are made when it comes to data center location and how they cool, where they pull their power from, the pull on regional infrastructure. So if that's regulated, we all need to advocate for that. And I do think that the last thing I'll say is it's hard for me when it comes to the responsibility of big companies
Yeah.
because their incentive is not to regulate themselves.
Yeah.
Like it never
Yeah.
has been. This is capitalism we're talking about.
Right.
We need to make sure that we're advocating and making them do the things because that's always the way change and progress has happened.
It's also really interesting as you were talking through that because I feel like right now in the media, right, the water usage of AI is coming up all the time. And I didn't I don't know why, but I wasn't thinking through streaming and all the other things and what those like it just is interesting how we get so focused. And so to your point, I like this is a great conversation for me because I'm now thinking, okay, what is my responsibility? Because I've been very thoughtful about AI, have not been thinking about streaming things, have not been thinking about Zoom meetings and video, right? Like, haven't been thinking about those things. And exactly, companies aren't going to do it, right? They are in the business of making money. Most companies, I shouldn't say all companies, but most companies aren't going to do it. So, figuring that piece out and also recognizing like, the stories coming out of Tennessee and water usage and power usage. And I think it was Tennessee, just big data center they didn't know was going in. So that regional activism and advocacy I think is so important. And I feel like I love this conversation because it also makes me feel like there are things that we can do. Like sometimes things feel very out of our control, and this feels like something where we can take action.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And I kind of want to emphasize what you just said, like with the Tennessee example, right? Part of regional and local activism and advocacy being so vital is that if you're going to put data centers in drought prone regions and in already stressed regions, the water usage implications of AI there is extremely real. And that is something that we absolutely have to advocate to stop.
Mhm.
But what you'll hear, and one of the reasons I'm drawing these distinctions, is that there's a subtlety. And so you'll go to these big AI conferences and they'll show the graph of, but look at all your other data center usage. Isn't
Ah.
streaming more important than this? And then use that as an excuse to not talk
Mhm.
about how hardcore the regional impacts are. And then you'll have environmental advocates like myself who only emphasize the regional impacts and then don't talk about the streaming impacts. And then
Mhm.
that will be used against us because, but you're ignoring the big picture and you're only taking a slice. So for me, a part of having a systems view
Yeah.
is actually being able to talk about and hold complexity, even
Yeah.
though complexity is not soundbiteable and it's difficult, it's increasingly difficult to talk about in the soundbiteable world, but it's actually the truth.
Yeah. I think our capacity to take in complex information, right, needs to be increased overall. And so this might be a great place for us to start. I'm curious, Nikki, from your perspective, if we had to say, what are the initial things that we should be asking for with regards to the impact of AI? Is it understanding our footprints? Is it holding companies accountable? Is it roundtables? Like, what would you say some of those initial steps might be?
Yeah, I feel like this is also a very hard one,
Okay.
right? In part because democratic infrastructure has been ripped
Right.
apart and
Right.
is in the process of being ripped apart. But that's
Right.
really what we need is we need regulation,
Yeah.
like desperately. That is the biggest thing that we need. We need people who are thinking ahead about in the next 5 years as AI becomes like the internet and just an underlying part of our infrastructure. How
Hmm.
are these data centers being placed? Where is the energy and water coming from? How is that going to be equitable and inclusive? How does that relate to the push and pull of the other energy sources we have? And we're going to make it more efficient. How are we going to make it more renewable? How are we going to ensure compliance with the way that companies are growing? What are their incentives going to be? What are the punishments going to be if they don't do it? How are those going to be enforced? Like, big picture, that's the only thing that really
Can so
drives industry in a
yeah.
particular direction. And I
Yeah.
think a part of my grief in the current times is that the institutions that have done that advocacy are being so attacked
Yeah.
right now. You know, the will of the people is deeply aided by strong institutions,
Yes.
and our strong institutions are under attack. So it does mean it's going to be harder for us to advocate for regulation the way that we need to, which is just so unfortunate. But then I also do feel like voting with your dollars is
Hmm.
not insignificant
Yeah.
because it helps to inspire us, right? But one of the reasons I don't focus on that is because I think OpenAI is like a $500 billion company
Hmm.
or something like that right now. Um, and I want to say Nvidia has been valued at 5 trillion, like some insane number, right? Nvidia is
Yeah.
the biggest company in the world right now. With those numbers, voting with your dollar is a bit less significant.
Yeah.
Everyone's ChatGPT subscription is a fraction of a
Of what
fraction
that
of the
actual number.
valuation of OpenAI is because they are thinking from a global infrastructure perspective. And regulation is the thing that will impact global infrastructure.
Oof, all of this. So then, Nikki, I come back around to say, in this, I know that you are meeting with groups. So, right, there's action that you are taking as well, and lots of people are taking. So, is it that, or is it do we focus on strengthening the democratic institutions again, right? Like, or is it a both and, which often is the case when we're talking about levels of complexity. I'm thinking for everyone's listening, not only are they being educated by you, they are also, if we were to say, hey, what are some initial steps? What is it that where you would guide them or recommend that they go?
Yeah, that's it's a good question. I'll say some general ones, but then I'll also share what I'm doing because
Okay.
I think that that's potentially supportive for people.
Yeah.
I do think thing number one is to understand your own footprint and to
Hmm.
understand data centers and that balance between global, regional, and local. I think another thing is absolutely focus on democratic infrastructure, which is something that all of us are hopefully doing right now.
Hmm.
And AI and democratic infrastructure are not, they're adjacent
Yeah.
right now,
Yeah.
in part because of how technology influenced the way that our country has evolved
Hmm.
over the course of this year. I'll say that. And then the personal thing that I'll note is one of the ways that I'm using AI right now is to get back some of my mind share and the
Hmm.
mental, emotional, and psychic energy that was being drained by contorting myself into the boxes that I needed to in order to be a intellectual worker, right?
Hmm.
Every time I use Gamma and it makes something that used to take me 6 hours to do take an hour, those 5 hours I'm spending in mindfulness practice. and taking care of my body, such that hopefully 3 of those 2 hours, if I'm doing a couple hours of mindfulness and embodied practice, are spent actually interacting with people and doing advocacy and giving me more bandwidth and capacity to be able to be a citizen the way that I want to be a citizen, instead of spending all of my time just trying to pay the bills, which is where a lot of us have gotten to.
Yeah.
And this is not a given, right? So many of us were already behind, and AI is just helping us feel like we can potentially catch up, but it feels like a bit of a losing game for a lot of us. And I
Yes.
don't want to invalidate that feeling, because it's a real
Yes.
feeling. I have a tremendous amount of privilege that I'm the kind of entrepreneur that has trained myself to pivot every 6 months, but that's
Hmm.
not everybody, you know?
That's not everybody's reality. I appreciate you naming that so much because I think it's often, again, this is a systems thinking perspective, right? To
Hmm.
understand, hey, what's normal for me or my reality on a day to day basis is not the same for everyone else. I really want to lean into this personal use that you just gave the example of, because really early when we were conversating and talking about AI, you were one of the things you talked about immediately is how much time that this had the potential to give back, particularly for women. And so I would love for you to share a little bit more about that. And also, as someone who is an environmentalist, has been an activist and an advocate throughout your entire career, were people surprised about the perspective you took around AI?
Yeah, oh, so there's two questions in there.
Yeah, it is.
One, it sounds like, is me as an environmental
Yeah,
activist, were people
yeah.
surprised by my position on AI? And the other
Yeah.
one was about women
Women using,
entrepreneurs and
yeah,
leaders using it.
yeah.
So I'll start with the environmental piece just to tie that thread up from the last conversation.
Mhm.
I think the people that know me well know that I am one of those people that will ask questions first and has a very strong value around curiosity and humility, especially when it comes to data. Like, I walk in assuming that I don't have enough context to understand the data. So
Yes.
I was the person that was like, wait, ChatGPT uses 10 times more energy than a Google search. And where I ended up was, how much energy globally is used by all the things? But not
Mhm.
everybody thinks like that,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Not everybody's going to go down a 6 month rabbit hole to read
On
all the
Reddit, not
Substack
everyone
blogs.
is doing that.
Yeah, yeah. So I do think the people that know me well knew that my
Mhm.
ADHD hyperfocus was now pointed in a particular direction.
Mhm.
And that ADHD piece is part of the women thing,
Mhm.
right? Is like, we are complex.
Mhm.
Many of us are perimenopausal. We
Yeah.
have kids. We're a bit neurospicy because we've always been the creative ones who never really thought we were neurospicy or thought it was a joke until the last couple of years, when everyone's taking it seriously now. We have a lot of cascading stuff going on.
Mhm.
And anything that can give us an opportunity to have more time to relate to ourselves and to have the spaciousness to let intuition and embodied practice and wisdom be the foundation of the way that we walk in the world is a tool that I'm interested in exploring. And AI happened to be one that was helping me a lot personally. So I went down this track to see if it could help our clients as well. And it absolutely can.
Yeah. Oh, Chloe, did you have a question?
I no, I was just thinking about the intentionality, right? Like
Mhm.
how important it is with everything we do, but especially as we think about AI, whether it's us as individuals using it, if it's leaders within an organization, just the importance of really being intentional and being thoughtful about what is our perspective on AI for ourselves, for our organizations, if we're leading or running, or even leaders within an organization, which kind of makes me go to like leadership and AI and how you're thinking about it for your company and the way you use it and your approach to it, and also how you are talking about this with your clients as
Mhm.
well, as far as that intentionality with using AI.
Mhm.
Yeah. So there's this incredible book called AI and Nonprofits by Cheryl
Wow.
Conti and Darian Rodriguez Heyman.
Okay.
And one of the phrases that they use in this book that I'm just obsessed with is shadow tech
Mm.
and BYOAI, which I think is just brilliant. It's fantastic. And what they mean by this is, and we found this to be true. We did a survey with these grantees that I mentioned earlier, and
Mhm.
of the 74, I want to say, organizations that replied, there was something like 70 to 75% of them have no AI policies, but
Mm.
70 to 70% of them, 70 to 75% of them are using AI individually.
Yep.
And this is
Wow.
exactly what the
Yeah.
BYOAI is, right? Is
Yeah.
like everybody's using it, but are we having a conversation about governance or policy or any frameworks whatsoever to use it so that we're all at least on the same page about how we're using it? And we're not there yet.
Yeah.
And so that is the first step that we advocate for. And actually, that's a part of our partnership with Software for Good because they have this beautiful digital resilience handbook and
Mhm.
series of tools. And so there are guidelines, there are ethical AI guidelines when it comes to which tools you're using across data privacy, environmental concerns, ease and safety. There's a whole bunch of things. There's a readiness assessment for organizations when it comes to how is your team right now when it comes to AI. There's sample governance policies. There's all these tools that are out there, and you can like there's so many organizations that have tools like that. And so that's usually what we advocate for first is like everybody and their mama right now is trying to charge people for something. And the
Yes.
first step that we say is do as much as you can, do your own recon on
Mhm.
which types of tools you feel like you need. Do your reading because there's lots of templates that are for free that can at least get you and your team on the same page. And then when you're ready to have some hand holding around values discussions, around governance, around tailoring these templates to really fit your team, then get some help because that's really where you need help. You're doing workforce development for the next 3 to 5 years. Some administrative tasks are going to be replaced. That's
Mhm.
just a given. How do you talk about that as a team? How do you grieve what's been lost? Are you doing video generation? Are you doing audio generation? Are you going to say we're not going to do Zoom video calls the majority of the time because we're the type of organization that wants to make animations and we want to be responsible about our data center usage? Those can
Mhm.
be complex conversations, and that's what you might need to be facilitated through.
Nikki, oh my gosh, I love this. So
Right?
I feel like we asked, I know I asked like three different times, like, what's our first step? And you had given us five different first steps, but it comes back to what you mentioned earlier, which is that education is the gap. And I love that you started there in your response, which is do your own understanding, do your own research so you can more deeply understand artificial intelligence impact, all of those elements before you jump in and bring in additional or outside expertise. Just start from a learning perspective, which I think we all can do that step today. And this gives us a great place to start. I also am coming into this conversation towards the end, and I'll be curious, Chloe, what's your thought as well? Is I feel more energized about what's possible with AI. I've always been super interested, but this conversation makes me more hopeful because we can track and understand our data use, our footprint, and use AI in a responsible way. But also, once we do that, what's possible is a whole new frontier around what we can build and what we create in conversation together. So you made me more bullish on AI. I'm curious, Nikki, from your perspective, are you bullish or bearish on AI?
Mm, that's good stuff. Um, well, me personally, this is a very personal question for me
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
it's truly the neurospicy part of me that feels bullish about AI
Mhm.
because I have had to mask and white knuckle my way through accommodations my entire career. It's one
Mhm.
of the reasons I'm an entrepreneur, right? Because I don't work the way a lot of other people work. And the way I've been able to accommodate myself using AI from the very beginning had me be like, okay, this tool is absolutely revolutionary.
Yeah.
And if it's not a responsible tool, I need to know sooner than later so I don't get attached, which is one of the reasons why I went down the rabbit hole. Is there a
Yeah.
way I can still use this and have it be responsible?
Yeah.
And it turns out, yes, there is. And it's going to take some work. And I also think the bullish part of me when it comes to AI is that everyone's going to be using it, whether or not they
Mhm.
want to.
Yeah.
Surveillance capitalism has been going on for 20, 25 years.
Yeah.
Most people hear that term and don't even know what it is. But it's just like the algorithms and the dopamine hacking with likes and big data, like all of that was already
All
happening. It was
ready.
just so much more under the surface.
Yes.
And one of the reasons AI, I think, is so provocative for people is because they can see it in a different way.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
every app we use, all the software, it all has AI integrations, and that's only going to get deeper. So we
Mhm.
don't have to use a language model ourselves to be fully integrated into the language model data extraction model. And
Yeah.
that's why I think everyone needs to know about it because I'm one of those people that's like, don't do something to me. I will know what's
Yeah.
happening.
I will know. I love this. I'm curious before we go to Chloe's response. You said it's a personal right question and then you said I'm feeling bullish. Is there any piece of you that is feeling pessimistic?
Um, it was kind of embedded, I think, in this whole talk, but it's worth saying explicitly.
Okay.
Like,
Okay.
I'm that person that was reading about NVIDIA's new, it's not an external hard drive, but that's how my brain translated it because I'm not a tech person. But
Mhm.
like, I'm looking into local models. I
Uh-huh.
signed up immediately for a co-working space that's AI focused because I'm learning how to do baby coding.
Okay.
Because what I don't want, and I feel like the bearish part of me is like, I'm not building all my infrastructure on OpenAI's platform or Anthropic's platform or
Yeah.
anybody's platform to then have them tell me, oh, the price changed. Oh,
Mhm.
I'm just going to upgrade from Chat GPT 4.5 to Chat GPT 5. No, you don't have access to 4.5 anymore unless you know how to do APIs. So all of those prompts that you just engineered that worked on the previous model, not going to work on this model and have to gut and rebuild your business infrastructure every time they decide they want to upgrade a model. Like I feel like for small businesses,
Mhm.
being beholden to the beast like that is really difficult.
Yeah.
So the part of me that's bearish is just the part of me that was always an advocate. Like OpenAI don't care about us.
Mm-mm.
Anthropic cares a little bit more, but the big companies, like, they are not incentivized to care about us. They are becoming infrastructure itself.
Yes.
So it's
Yes.
up to us to align our own infrastructure, either locally on our own hard drives, which is where I'm going, because I would like all my own IP to be in there. I don't want to have to scrub names. I want it to be easy for me. So I'm learning how to do baby coding so that I know how to use that stuff, right? And I know how to build it. But other people can just align themselves with companies that have an incentive to be with the people, right?
Mhm.
Proton just came out with their own language model, I want to say in June, and it's called Lumo. And Proton was always the folks that were like, if you want an alternative to Google, be with us, which is, I mean, that's a big ass swing. I love
Yeah.
Proton. And the fact that they have a language model, like that's probably the most data secure one that you're going to find. And they're probably not going to try to take it away from the people. So that's a long-winded way of saying I've always been bearish when it comes to industry's incentive to take care of the little people.
Yes.
I've never been
Yeah. Yeah.
confused about that, which
Yes.
is why I take on so much myself in terms of personal accountability and responsibility.
Oh gosh, I love this. I have to shout out. I love Proton as well. They're not a sponsor yet, but I do love Proton as well. But I love that perspective, Nikki. Chloe, how about you?
It's well, just before I go where I'm thinking, but to build on or contribute to what Nikki was saying, it was also interesting. I was um reading, I was probably watching something the other day. It's sticking in my brain, but around how more and more companies are starting where everyone was going to subscriptions and outsourcing for technology with all of these different shifts and licensing and XYZ and data concerns. So many companies are starting to bring things back in house that they used to like. It's just interesting. It'll be interesting to see what happens in in business around
Mhm.
that licensing and systems and shifts. I would say mixed bag on AI.
Mhm.
Like the bullish part of me very much aligns, like Nikki, what you were saying as far as like how am I now using the time that I'm saving? Also thinking about concepts around, and it's I think it's plain big the where's my zone of genius, or I
Mm.
am I getting that reference wrong?
The big
Zone
leap.
of genius, the big leap. Thank you.
Mm.
Zone of genius versus zone of excellence. Like I have some zones of excellence that AI could take over for me. And then I get to play in my zones of genius,
Mhm.
right? Where like I get to do more, contribute more, have a bigger and better impact because I can have AI helping with those other areas, right? And that's an amazing thing. And so very like bullish on that end. The bearish part of me is 100% like corporations don't care, right? They care about, especially when it comes to publicly traded corporations and shareholder value and how beholden they are to that and how focused they are on that. Like they're going to do what makes money. So it really emphasizes the importance. And Nikki, you've been saying this through the whole thing of our like personal responsibility
Mhm.
to think about what we're using. Yes, where we're spending our money may not have a huge impact when it comes to a subscription, but on the bigger platforms, on the bigger picture, like how are we letting our data be used? How are we thinking about it? What does that look like for each of us individually? What are we comfortable with? Like, I definitely have been in the space of being pretty cynical, like, well, everyone knows everything about me anyway. Like, there's nothing that they're not going to know through my phone. That's, I mean, it's very cynical. It's also not a very responsible take, right? Like, I think we all have a personal responsibility in that area to really be thinking about how are we using AI? How are we legislating? How are we voting? How are we thinking about regulation around it? Because all those things are needed. So I love AI. I use it. I in all kinds of things, and I want to be mindful of how and when and why and where and all those pieces.
Yeah. So I think the across the board it's mixed, right? Both bullish and bearish. I think we do have that element too that culture moves things, and so how people feel about AI can have a lot of impact on even the largest companies. So much more to do around systems thinking. But Nikki, I think you gave us both a systems way of thinking and approach, and then how we can also think about our individual actions. If there is, as we close out here, kind of one thought or word you would like to leave the listeners of this episode with, what would that be?
Ooh, a thought or a word.
Yes.
Growth mindset. A lot is
Mm.
changing very quickly. It is absolutely scary. And being able to stay at the growth edge, knowing that it's going to be really uncomfortable, but you don't have to make yourself unsafe and you can pull
Mhm.
back when you need to, is really vital. And for anyone who wants to follow up with me on any of this, a part of my work and the work at Soil and Shadow is supporting women leaders and their teams with forming their own kind of leadership profiles in the way that you heard me talk about here. Why is AI important to you? What do you want it to help you with? Going all the way to what are your values and your frameworks around privacy and environmental impact? And then how does that integrate with your team? That's all us.
That's all Soil and Shadow. And you, Nikki, thank you so much for being here And thank you for your leadership on a day to day, month to month, year to year. I love and am very honored and blessed to be able to just text you with questions and thoughts as we explore what's next. And so, thank you so much for being a guest and thank you for your leadership.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me and for this conversation.
We hope today's conversation gave you something to think about and, more importantly, something you can use. If this episode resonated with you, we'd love for you to share it with another leader, entrepreneur, or friend who might benefit from hearing it. And for additional resources, frameworks, and tools related to our topic, please be sure to subscribe to our newsletter at cocreatework.com. And of course, if you have any question you'd like us to explore in a future episode, we would love to do that. So please send it to podcast@cocreatework.com. As always, thank you for being here and thank you for your leadership.